Hello, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. My name is Charlotte McKechnie. I'm Director of Performance and Academics at A-List Education. Really happy to have you all here this evening, and anyone who's watching in the future. I'm going to give it maybe 1 minute, just under that, and then get started proper. But in the meantime, start sharing my screen, talking about the agenda, and then some more people will trickle in. So we're going to be talking today about what are the things to do to put you in the best chances of getting a 1500 and above on the SAT. I've been tutoring the SAT for almost about 8 years. I did history and literature at Harvard, and I didn't know anyone who went to the States when I was applying, and had to spend a lot of time on websites trying to work out what was going on. So it's really nice to be on the other side and helping wonderful students like yourselves, or like your children, like your students, if you are one of the adults at home guiding students on the way to test day. So I have a lot of questions to get through, selection from maths, and then reading, and then writing. And I'm going to do them live and talk through my workings as we go. So if you want to screenshot anything as we go along, please feel free. Or indeed, this is being recorded, and we will be sending out the recording shortly after tonight. So here we've got the agenda. It's likely that everyone knows at least a bit about the SAT who's on there, but I want to just do a brief overview of what it is and how getting such top scores is so hard when we've been training particular ways through the A-level and IB system. Really, you've probably been doing that for 11, 12 years at this point, and it's a big pivot to standardized testing. So we'll start with that. The key techniques is going to be the longest section, because that's the section in which I'm going to take you through different practice questions across the different content domains and introduce different ways that you might want to approach them. I'll finish off with some resources and what I tell my students when they're gunning up for testing. Just for turning up, you have a webinar code for our 5-hour tuition packages. This will also be on the last slide. So I wanted to put it first and last. At the end, we'll also be having a Q&A session. So please do think of questions, and I'll be leaving time at the end for those. So firstly, why are we here? Why should we do the SAT? It's a lot of work to get these scores. Is it really worth it? I would suggest yes. And these numbers, I think, give our answer to us. So over the last few years, these are the percentage of students who've been accepted to these tier 1 US universities who submitted test scores along with their application. So as you can see, especially in our Harvard, Yale, Princeton, over 80% of the students that they accepted to Harvard College, Princeton University, et cetera, did send in an SAT or an ACT score. That implies that it does indeed help your application to submit one. I mean, they are also taking, say, Harvard, 17% of students who didn't submit one. So it's not the absolute end of the world if you can't get your score to above 1500, but we would really, really, really recommend it. Why 1500 and above? Well, let's look at the bottom of this page. So the admitted student class profile is the best data that you can get when you're trying to work out what is a good SAT score for the places to which I want to apply. The universities do publish this information, so I would always recommend going straight to the university's admission page and get the data straight from the university rather than from third-party sources or AI, which tend to just skim the surface of sometimes less reputable and yes, less accurate sources. So go to the horse's mouth, go to the universities themselves, and we've done that for you in here. But year on year, we see these similar ranges. So really, very high 1400s to very high 1500s. That's the kind of 25% to 75% range of admitted students that they're getting. So really, you want to be submitting scores certainly within the range. If you don't ultimately produce a score that is not within the range of the admitted class score range from last year, I would not submit. I spent this summer going around different tier 1 universities across America, and every admissions officer said exactly the same thing. Submit a score if it's within the range. If it's even slightly below, it's not going to help you. But it very much is going to help you if you can put it within the range, ideally at the top of the range, but anywhere within the range is a good thing. You might be also thinking about the ACT. So SAT versus ACT, obviously the scoring is hugely different, 1600 versus 36. There is no university that prefers the SAT or the ACT. It is completely up to you. The tests have very different personalities in their question designs. So the best way I would choose between them is to sit a full test on both and see what feels more natural to you to sit. The ACT is still faster. It's going to be notably quite faster until spring 2026, in which, and that at spring 2026, it's becoming shorter. It is becoming, it's giving students slightly more time for question and is becoming giving timing that is much more similar to the SAT. But until then, it's still much faster. Other notable differences: SAT, a lot more time, but the questions are notably more convoluted. So it really does depend what you prefer. You sit the SAT on your own laptop, your own iPad, etc., etc. You sit the ACT on a test center provided computer. It can feel a bit like sitting your driver's theory test, if some of you have already done that. All right. Format of the SAT: the first section is English, the second section is maths. You get 2 modules of each, and the first module and the second module are identical. It's just that the second module hopefully will be much harder, because hopefully you'll get put into the harder level. So we've got 32 minutes to do 27 questions in English. 1:10 is not a lot of time per question, but we'll talk about how to do that. So say questions 1 to 15 are the English ones, 16 to 27 are the writing ones. When I say writing, I mean grammar. There is no essay on the SAT anymore. You may see reference to the SAT essay online. You can completely ignore it. There's a couple of states in the domestic US that students are able to sit an SAT essay there. It's unclear why, but international students do not sit an essay for the SAT, so you can ignore that, but you really are tested a lot on grammar. So not a lot of time, but again, remember, all of the questions are worth the same. Be getting back to this in the general tips, but it's much more advisable to spend the dominant amount of your time on a slightly smaller number of questions and get them correct, and then only do the questions that you find really, really hard at the end. In fact, if you do them at all. So always do the easy and medium level questions first on the SAT. And I really do, especially 1500 and above, that is still the way to do it. Do 1500 and above, you do not need to answer all the questions to get a 1500 plus, or even to get a 1550. In fact, you actually put yourself in a much better position to do that. What you're really going to help yourself by doing is focusing on module 1 on each of English and on maths. So English has a module 1 and a module 2, maths has a module 1 and a module 2. Module 1 is where most of your score comes from. So you really, really, really want to be as accurate as possible on module 1. Also try very hard on module 2, but you want a perfect module 1 for an above 1500. And then that gives you the grace to have 1, 2 errors, maybe 3 on module 2, but you absolutely want a perfect module 1. And often on test day, students are reporting module 1 is not too bad at all. Often students are reporting that module 2, it seems like it's been written by Satan. So it can be really tricky indeed, but module 2, but module 1, not that bad, but it has to be correct. In maths, question number 1 is easy, question 22 is difficult. So respect the easy and the medium questions, don't rush through them to get to the hardest questions, because again, all questions are worth the same. You'll also notice I'm mentioning easy and hard level on this slide. Module 2 will either be module 2 easy or module 2 hard, depending on your accuracy in module 1. As long as you get about a 75% accuracy on module 1, you will get put into module 2 hard. And that's what you really want to do, because you need to get put into module 2 hard in order to score above 600, 610, 620. So module number 1, or task number 1 is to get into the hard module consistently. And then ultimately, task number 2 is to produce a perfect module 1 consistently. In terms of why this test can be so difficult, it's that it's testing very different thinking than GCSEs, A-level, IB. Those exams really prioritize depth of content knowledge and a very specific way of answering the questions. And oftentimes, even if you get the right answer in maths, you won't get all the points unless you do it in the very particular way that the mark scheme is looking for. The SAT is totally different. It does not care one iota how you answer the question, just that you get it correct. So the big thing that I would say to all students when they're thinking about how to really excel on the SAT and get those top marks is to remain open-minded about how they're approaching the test. SAT math, for example, as we will cover, is very much a typing test. And it's much more about, have you read the question? Can you use the graphing calculator than anything else? Alrighty. In terms of preparation, it's very unusual to be able to get the scores one is looking for with just, say, a half term's preparation or a small amount of preparation. Most students are preparing for 3-4 months or maybe even more. So starting early is definitely the key. Why is that important? Because there's a lot to ingrain and a lot to habituate. We absolutely need certain content knowledge. GCSE maths content should be very solid. The grammar rules are very important, and building up over a long period of time the ability to parse different types of reading texts swiftly, very, very important. However, just as important with content is how we approach the questions, what we will be doing tonight, the technique part. And mindset, what I mean by that is when you are completing practice sections or drills, or especially full practice tests, the most important thing that you can do is to analyze your performance. So think very, very carefully about what did you do to get that question correct in order to repeat it, or where did you go wrong? At what point did you kind of walk off the path of accuracy that resulted in an error? So working out what that step was, what that misstep was, or perhaps a step that you didn't take is really, really, really important in order to see consistent reflection. What I do not recommend is blasting through test after test after test. It is a waste of resources and it will not get you the consistent improvement that you're looking for. We do want to expose ourselves to a lot of practice questions, but we really want to do so in a way that's reflective. Otherwise, you're not getting the full benefit of the resources. So what are these different ways of doing the tests? Firstly, oh, excellent. I would recommend throwing traditional maths out of the window. I mean, no disrespect to math teachers worldwide, maths is hugely important, but it's actually not how the SAT has designed their tests. So let's look at this question. We have function here. The function f gives the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit that corresponds to a temperature of X kelvins. If a temperature is increased by 2.10 kelvins, by how much did the temperature increase in degrees Fahrenheit? Something I would say is we cannot annotate, so we want to write down keywords. You're going to have to put up with my beautiful screenwriting today. So I love being able to underline these things. We cannot do that on the test. So I would be writing down this information on the scrap paper. So scrap paper is provided. Oh, now I could do this with maths, but or with algebra, but let's not. So I have they've given us a variable here. They've given us a letter. When they do that, it's an indication that the value in question doesn't really matter. It's about the relationship of how the different items of the question work together that matters. So I would use the plugin. Sorry, that's not very clear, but that's an L. I would choose the plugin technique here. So step one, we're going to pick a number. I would pick something small, not 1, not 0. They have weird properties. Let's say X is 2. And we're going to do the problem with the chosen number. Oh, this is a lot of working here. I'm going to have to be careful with how I write this, how I fit this. Okay, so when we're dealing with 2 kelvins, what is the temperature in Fahrenheit? This does require some knowledge of functions. Functions comes up a lot on the SAT, so become very, very comfortable and familiar with how we use functions. And the other thing that I would note in here is that that's going to be 2, 7, 1, 15. I would write out, I'm going to be writing out every single step. I would like to say that I'm this brilliant at mental maths, but no, I didn't prepare this earlier. Just to shave some time off of this presentation. But okay. So what I've done here is I wrote out this function, but I replaced the X with my chosen number. So we do that, we get an answer, okay. But are we finished? No, not quite, because our question is, if the temperature is increased by 2.10 kelvins, by how much did it increase in Fahrenheit? Okay, well, if we started, so if this idea, so if there's variables, if there's a letter, use plugin 9 times out of 10. If the scenario is changing, an increase or a decrease, it's an indication that we need to plug in again. So the temperature has increased by 2.10 kelvins. I started at 2 kelvins. So let's do it again with 4.10 kelvins, because 2 plus 2 plus 210 is 410. And it's always good to write everything out. And okay, I don't need to put the 0, but anyway, I've done it now. You can put this all into a calculator. Desmos is built in to the scenario, into the software, but you want to be very, very, very careful with brackets and your typing. So just be very aware of that. It's negative 8.29. And if this feels like overkill of, oh my goodness, why is she writing down every step? Because it's safer. That is the key to above 1500. It's you need to be really, really detail orientated, very, very careful. It's better to take a couple of extra seconds to write out this working than miss a negative or miss expanding the brackets or something like that. That's where you can lose marks very, very, very quickly. Okay, so our question is, by how much did the temperature increase? So it was at negative 456-ish. It's gone to negative 452-ish. What's the difference between there? It's going to be something very, very small. Okay, if one puts that into a calculator, we will work out that it will, in fact, get to 3.78, which is one of our answers. Huzzah. But even I could save time here by saying that's going to be about 3 something. So it has to be A. It's definitely not 35 or something in the hundreds. So with plugin, we know that we can use it when there are variables in the question. So we pick a number, we replace the variable with a number, do the problem with that number, and match to the answers. Let's keep going. Okay, time am I on? Okay, I am going to have to skip some of the questions that I'm not going to be able to get through all the questions I wanted to on this presentation, but okay. All right, I've got an equation up here. Amir has determined that the number of ice cream cones he will sell on a given day is related to the temperature. The equation above estimates the relationship where T is the high temperature in Fahrenheit and C is the number of ice cream cones he sells that day. How will the number of ice cream cones he sells change if the temperature increases by 4 Fahrenheit? Okay, again, I've got variables, so it's probably a good idea that I use plugin here. It's a lot safer. Yes, you can do this with algebra, but you're much more likely to err via use of brackets. And also, you already probably know how to use algebra, so what's the point of me doing that? Plugin, step 1, pick a number. Now I'm going to pick for T because we're being asked about C. So let's do T is 10. So how many cones do we have when T is 10? And yes, again, I'm writing out this step. I know that we don't normally do it in maths anymore, but that's good. But this is worth it. 116. No, that's not it. But change if the temperature increases. So again, the situation is changing. The temperature is increasing by 4. It was 10 Fahrenheit. We need to increase it by 4. So let's plug in 14. 14. that's 32. And we've got 112 plus 32. So 148. So our, how will it change? Okay, well, 148 minus 116 is going to be 32. Our answer is C. So I chose a number, I did the problem with that number, and I matched to the answers. I plugged in twice because the scenario changed. Again, I'm not saying that you cannot do this with algebra, but what I'm saying is what I've observed and what A-List has noted in our 30. I'm not going to have time to do this, so let's go on. Okay, we'll come back to these if I have time. But what I've observed is that it's much safer to use a technique rather than a traditional method. Traditional methods, there's much more room for human error, and that's what we want to minimize. Okay, so as I was saying earlier, the SAT gives you a calculator. It has built in this Desmos graphing calculator into the Bluebook software, so you can bring a calculator should you wish. Bring your TI or Casio or something, whatever you're using for, say, A-level maths or IB higher level maths, but you don't need to. You can use, you can use the one they built, and I really recommend that because we're not going to do this with maths. We're going to demonstrate how we can use the technology to save time. So the main thing I would know though, solution to a system of equations means where the lines cross. This is slightly Americanized lingo. We maybe wouldn't use exactly those words in the UK. This would be a very classic GCSE question, and they want to see all your working about substituting or subtracting or whatever. No, do not do that on the SAT. So a solution to a system means the crossing point between the two lines, but a solution to an equation will mean, if I just kind of make this up, will mean the x-intercepts. So if there's only one shape on the graph and they say solution, they mean x-intercepts. If there's multiple shapes on the graph, if it's a system of equations and they say solution, they mean the crossing point. But we could use the same Desmos graphing calculator for both of them. Okay, now bear with me. So I'm going to go to Desmos, and I'm going to type in 4x plus 5 is 2. Oh, why? This is really funny. It will not. Ah, there we go. Okay, great. Right. I'm actually going to just share my whole screen. Or not. Let's do this. Everyone, it really freaks me out how doesn't tell me anymore what people are looking at. But anyway, hopefully people can see my Desmos graphing calculator here. Let me double check what I'm supposed to be typing in. 4x plus 5y equals 2. 4x plus 5y equals 2. 3y minus 2x equals 10. 3y minus 2x equals 10. Fantastic. Desmos is so kind that it gives us these, it gives us the point of intersection immediately, so I can go straight back to my answers and in a moment. So remember, -2 equals 2, and that matches one of our answers. But for the sake of you not seeing a bunch of different screens, I'm going to go on to the next question whilst we're here. The next question was a single quadratic. It was asking us what's the solution to the equation above? And the equation is x squared minus 10x plus 18 equals 0. Okay, so we've got the one shape. It's more obvious quadratic if I take out the equals 0, it won't change your answer. But this is a quadratic, but let's just put in the equals 0 in. Okay, lovely x-intercepts here. I'm caring about the x-intercepts because, as I said, it's asking us for a solution to the equation. That means x-intercepts. So let's remember 2 point something something, positive 2 point something, and 7.6. Okay, 2 point something and 7.6. Okay, so when we are, this one we had, I think it was 2.45 blah 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 and 7.65 something. So when I put these, which unfortunately is not exactly what we're getting here. So now we would want to put all of these into a calculator and find which one gives us one of these. Happily, I already did this, but so we essentially want to turn surds form into decimal form, which I appreciate that might seem like a bit of a pain, but actually we only need to type this one in and then add in a 2, and then you could take away the negative to get this one, and then you could take away the 2 to get that one. So actually it's very, very quick to type all of these in. And it can be tempting to go for A because it has the right numbers, but that's a negative, which is not what we want. Ooh, 654. So C is looking good. Okay, so if I put all of these into a calculator one at a time, these are the numbers that I would get. And look at that match. So that's what we want to do. I appreciate that might seem convoluted when because I'm talking about it a lot. It's actually very, very, very quick. So if there's an equation in a question 9 plus times out of 10, go straight to the graphing calculator, and that's going to get you the answer. This is what I mean by the SAT is very much a typing test, really not a maths test anymore. All of these, we're not going to do all of them, but just to demonstrate, lots of these are questions on which we could use Desmos. Got equation here, an equation here, equations here. So 11, 14, and 25 are ones that I would use Desmos on. You could type that in, and if you're looking for not a solution of the inequality, then you're looking for what x value is not in the shaded region. For 14, Desmos does not like z, so you would have to change that and type in the same thing, but just use x, and in half a second of that, or a couple of seconds of typing, that will get you that solution. 25, this they're trying to test the turning point, or maybe you would call it the maximum, the minimum point, or the vertex. These are all the same different terms for the same thing. I would type this into Desmos, and so this you do want to know that will give you a quadratic shape. If it intersects with a line at, and you will want to build up the math knowledge that y equals a number is going to be a horizontal line. There is only one place in the world on the graph in which a horizontal line will match a quadratic at one point. And that is the turning point or the maximum or the minimum point. So if you put this into Desmos, scroll until you find the maximum point, click on that coordinate, that's your answer. For 16, I would use plugin. Got variables in the question, variables in the answer. So I would maybe pick small numbers for X and Y. When we put 2 in for X and 3 in for Y, put that into our calculator very carefully, we will get probably quite a large number. And you want to match that again when you go to the answer choices, putting 2 in for X and 3 in for Y, and just be very, very careful about brackets. 26 is one of the only questions on the SAT that you do, say maths because we're in Britain, that you do actually have to do some maths. But still, I do think there's still some technique here. I wouldn't use Desmos because there's a third, we've got X and Y, so normally, yes, Desmos. But because of the nature, there's a third letter, and the answer choices are incredibly complicated. It's not really a sign that you can use Desmos. It's not going to be quicker. However, we could do some maths, but certainly speed up by looking at the answers. So we have this system of equations. For each real number r, which of the following points lies on the graph of each equation in the xy plane for the given system? Okay. So if I look at these equations, actually, the bottom one is just the top one times by 5. So Desmos is just going to give us the same line, which isn't hugely helpful. So that's an instance in which we do want to, or an instance in which we can't use Desmos, unfortunately. But let's think about our answers here. So these answers are all said they're all points. So each answer is a coordinate. And the right coordinate would be when we put this in for X, we get this for Y. A looks blooming awful, so let's not deal with that. When I'm using the answers, I often go for the middle B, but I'm particularly going to go for B this time because I noticed the Y is just R, which is beautiful. So let's do that. And because these equations are the same, I can just pick one of them. So let's go with the top one because that is smaller. Write that out. Okay, so B, for answer choice B, X is negative 3y over 2 plus 7 over 2. Remember that. And y is r. Okay, well, let's start with the y being r. So 2x plus 3r equals 7. Let's solve for x and see where that gets us. 2x is negative 3r plus 7. X is 2 plus 7 over 2. Okay, so when we made yr, our x is negative 3 over 2r plus 7. So does that match? Negative 3r over 2 plus 7 over 2. Sorry, I meant that. So actually, yes, when we put in our r for this, r for y, we got this for x. So that works. Very, very good. if we're unsure, but let's see what a wrong example would have been. So let's try C. 2x plus 3y equals 7. Okay, so this time let's put the r in for x equals 7. So negative plus 7. So when x is r, y is negative 2r over 3 plus 7 over 3, which is close, but it's not correct because look at this sign. This is positive and this is negative, so that is not correct. So when we did B, when we put y in for r, we got the exact x and we got the signs. So that's why it's B. Hard question. Also, I know that it's 26. That's because it's from the PDF practice tests, which give you more questions. Actually, on the Blue Book real test day test, you will only have 22 questions. Goodness me, I need to stop doing maths and go on to reading. So, unfortunately, actually, I love English, but unfortunately, because there were some great math questions here. Sorry, just an indication that when we have, again, equations, indication that we can use our Desmos graphing calculator. But if there's a letter, we can also use plugin. And I appreciate so that we can use the technique here and not in the last one because we've only got one expression in the questions, in the answer choices, which is not the case before. So for this one, I would give C a number. So I'm not going to do it, but I would type into Desmos negative 5x. I would type this into Desmos, look at the crossing point. I'm being asked for the y value of the solution. So I would get that coordinate and then putting 2 in for C to each of these answer choices, one of them will match that coordinate. Alrighty, let's go on to some reading. This just very quickly, functions, very common on the SAT, especially transforming functions, so moving around functions. A question like this will appear pretty much every SAT, normally towards the end of Math Module 1. So be very familiar with how functions move around, and very close question reading is needed here. One of the best things you can do for SAT maths is sit some papers, get the PDF versions, put them side by side, like compare 4 or 5 Math Module 1s and study the question patterns. What types of questions are appearing where? You'll notice, for example, this is near the end. SAT is very much built on patterns. So the best thing that you can do to get to high 1500s, 1600 is to become highly familiar with those patterns and know for you what is the best way of answering the question for each of those patterns. SAT math takeaways: be really knowledgeable about the GCSE maths syllabus. Identify when we can use techniques. You want to be really good on the content and really good on the techniques. Even if you're sitting there thinking, my goodness, I could do it quicker with regular maths. I promise you that is probably not how you're going to get to 1600. So be aware of different ways of working. SAT reading. SAT reading comes in 2 categories. We've got craft and structure. These tend to be questions, say 1 to 9. There'll be vocab questions, function of the underlying sentence, overall structure of the text questions. And then questions, say 10 to 16, will be more about the content. What is the main idea? What choice most logically complete? So you have to create the ending of the passage. The information and ideas tend to be harder. So questions kind of 12 to 15 are particularly hard on both modules. So leave them until the last, if you do them at all. To get 1500 plus, I would say the best way of doing that is do all of module 1 and get it correct. It really has to be perfect consistently, module 1. Module 2, skip the hardest 2 questions. Guess something, do not take any time to answer them, because you'll probably get them wrong anyway, and they'll take 3 or 4 minutes per question, which is madness. So probably around 13, 14, 14, 15 will be a couple of questions that are just really difficult. They're probably going to be the which findings and most logically completes. Very, very hard question types normally. So don't do them. Guess something. You don't get any more credit. So it's completely illogical to do the hardest questions. Unless English is your thing and you can get them. If you're getting them all correct consistently, then hey, go for it. But you're probably not, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here. Okay, SAT reading. You do the same 4 steps for every single reading question. I'm going to do 2 very quickly, but it's the same 4 steps. Step number 1. Oh, okay. We read the question. So, which finding, if true, would most directly support the researcher's conclusion? The conclusion is normally towards the end. For these ones, I would certainly try just reading the conclusion, see if you can get away with it. So the conclusion is up here. Examining chemical data from L and M derived rocks ranging from 285 million to 3.8 billion years ago, researchers dated the transition to 3.2 billion years ago. Okay, we need some more context. So, but I would certainly start at the end. A lot of the time, actually, especially if it's module 1, it's not necessarily complex science, so you can work out what's going on. So you can save some time often by just reading the conclusion, but we need a bit more time here. So I'm particularly going to think about the core words. Early Earth is thought to have been characterized by a stagnant lid tectonic regime in which the upper L was essentially immobile and there was no interaction between the L and the underlying mantle. Researchers investigated the timing of the transition from a stagnant lid regime to a tectonic plate regime in which the L is fractured into dynamic plates that in turn allow L and M material to mix. Examining chemical data. Okay, this is a very common question style. Firstly, they like science. Secondly, most reading passages start with an old idea. Early Earth is thought to have been. So people previously thought that L was essentially immobile and there was no interaction between L and M. Okay, so before old idea, L and M separate. Researchers investigated the timing of the transition from the stagnant tectonic plate regime. Okay, extra stuff, I'm going to get rid of this. So early Earth is thought, L immobile, there was no interaction. So what did they do? They investigated the timing of the transition from stagnant to this thing. So where it fractured and okay, so these things mixed. They ranged from 2.5. Okay, so there was a change 3.2 billion years ago. Beforehand, L and M were separate. And after, L and M are mixing. Got to mix. And the conclusion is that it did this at 3.2 billion years ago. There's some other detail there, I don't care. Also notice that I was, any complex words, ignore them. You really can save time by just doing the first letter. So complex names or science terms, just do the first letter. Okay, let's go on. We've paraphrased it. And we want to create the answer in our own words. So our steps are read the question, read the passage, the relevant text, read the relevant text of the passage. Question, passage, paraphrase passage to create your own answer, and then go to the answer process. So what would support the conclusion? Okay, well, something about that. Before 3.2 billion years ago, there was not mixing. After 3.2 billion years ago, there was mixing. Okay. Rocks known to be over older than 3.2 billion years. Among rocks, significantly more are mantle deprived, but the ops are significantly more are mantle derived than lithospheric. Younger than, no, it's not derived. No, the mixing, we need mixing. There's no mixing there. Mantle derived rocks older than okay, I know that. So mixing, okay, that could be good. Show more older than 3.5. Oh no. No, they would show less if they're, because we old rocks, old, no mix, young, mix. So no, that is the opposite. There's a positive correlation between the age and the chemical similarity. And that correlate, no, because chemical similarity is not the same thing as mixing. That correlation, no. Mantle-derived rocks younger contain some material that is not found in older mantle-derived rocks, but is found in older. Yes. Okay, younger, mix. And the mantle, so young rocks contain some L rock stuff. Excellent. It's D. Paraphrasing really, really, really makes a difference. I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend doing that. So we'll do another one very quickly. Let's have a think about what were those steps. So we're reading the question. Which choice most logically completes the text? We read the passage, okay? I'll highlight keywords. Some ethicists hold that the moral goodness of an individual's actions depends solely on whether the actions themselves are good. Actions, irrespective of the context in which they're carried out. Philosopher Purcell has shown surviving works of Aztec philosophy express a different view. Purcell reveals these works posit, so posit just means suggest, an ethical system in which an individual's actions are judged in light of how well they accord with the individual's role in society and how well they contribute to the community. Okay, so we had this old idea. This is old versus new. Idea is a very common design of reading. It often starts with an old idea, then introduces a different idea, and you're nearly always tested on the different new idea. So we want to paraphrase the new idea. These works, so individuals' actions are judged in light of how well they accord with the individual's role in society and how well they contribute to the community. Okay, role in society. Okay, so the chief or the king or something. Okay, so or a high medic or something like that. So yeah, like if a king who also really helped his people murdered somebody, maybe they wouldn't mind as much because Aztecs wouldn't mind as much, or they would judge them less because the role in society is what really, really matters and how well they contribute. To the extent these works are representative of Aztec thought, okay, yes. So if we're logically complete, the text analysis suggests that, I'm not going to look at the answers, suggests that, yeah, a person in high position can get away with more. A high position who is also very productive and helpful and useful can get away with stuff. Okay. They would have disputed the idea that the morality of an individual's actions can be assessed by appealing to standards of behavior that are independent of, okay, so see, dispute, what would they dispute? Individuals' actions, independent. Oh, I like this. Let's keep this, because that's basically, so an individual's actions, independent, so no, as in it is correct, because as Aztecs would dispute it, the social role in society is everything to them. B would not have accepted the notion that morality of an individual's actions can be fairly, no, there's nothing about do not live in the same society. It's a random choice, it's not B. Who contributed a great deal, okay. Could be that's relevant to the text, could be judged as morally good, even if those acts were inconsistent with behaviors the Aztecs regarded as good in all contexts. I don't love this because it actually doesn't say what the Aztecs regard actions as good, so I don't love C as much as A. A is better so far. Similar actions performed by people in different roles would have been regarded, no. People in different roles are not, they would not be judged the same. So B and D expressly contradict the passage. Great deal, even if, no, C is wrong, because, so this happens a lot. The first half works really well. The second half does not. In reading, our whole answer choice needs to match. So our answer is A. Okay. I'm going to run hugely over time, so I'm not going to be able to get to all of our writing questions, but this is still how to conquer SAT writing. There are 3 different questions for SAT writing. You're tested, or at least 3 major question categories. You have to know how to answer verb questions, singular versus plural. Boundaries is to do with clause joining, and Americans will join clauses slightly different to UK and UK school systems around the world. So knowing an independent and an independent clause, how they join is different from how you would join an independent and a dependent clause. You have to know the punctuation that are different for those. You also need to know the punctuation rules in general. So the best way of approaching SAT writing is to learn the grammar rules very consistently. I would do it from a textbook, our A-List Book of Knowledge, and this is not a plug because I make money from it. Like, I don't, it's just a genuinely very, very good book. Our A-List Book of Knowledge lists all of the grammar rules with all, with question drills for every single question type. I strongly recommend getting those, or a different book if you want, but write down the rules of commas, of how to join different clauses. Say, how do Americans use semicolons, colons, apostrophes, etc., etc. That's really, really, really important. So you've got to know that. Alrighty. I will, in our last couple of minutes, I will have time for a couple of questions. So we'll stop sharing on that. I see we might have one there. Is the recording we can watch again? Yes, so this is being recorded, and we will be, I will be checking, but I believe we're sending out this recording to everyone who is registered. So you're very, very welcome to watch ad infinitum to the other explanations. What I would leave you with more than anything else would be take the time to really understand the content, but embrace other ways of working. It's really, really, really important not to approach the SAT like you would A-levels, IB, GCSE. It's testing different things. It's testing how you think laterally, how you think under time pressure. Where can I find a link to watch it? We will send it out. We have not sent it out yet, but we shall. The other major thing that I would say in improvement is read the question. Answer what the question actually says, not what you want it to be. That is the biggest advice, the best advice that I can give you to reach a 1600. I appreciate it sounds really obvious, but almost nobody actually does it. So for every single SAT question, double check what it actually says. For English, highlight keywords. For maths, write down the keywords. For English, be driven by evidence, the textual evidence for reading, the grammar rules for writing. In maths, utilize the graphing calculator very heavily. Study past papers to become very familiar with other ways of working and other ways of thinking about the question. When you're doing practice papers, do them in different environments. Do not just study in your bed or in your bedroom or at the dining table that you always do. Go to libraries, go to disused school classrooms, go to quiet cafes. Make sure that you can achieve the level of performance that you're attaining when the environmental variables change. That's really, really, really important. The other thing that I would say is we've got 6 practice tests on Bluebook, as I'm sure people will have noticed. I also really recommend the Princeton Review digital SATs. And I really recommend the Test Innovator digital SATs. They are both for purchase. They are other tutoring companies, frankly, but they're test prep resource companies. So Princeton Review digital SAT and Test Innovator digital SAT, their practice tests are really excellent, especially Test Innovators. They're very hard, which means they're very good resources for test day, because test day will likely be harder than the questions that you get on the Bluebook practice tests, which is very frustrating. But that is the pattern that we've noticed. So you can best prepare yourself by definitely using Bluebook to practice, and I would have it be the last practice test that you do before test day. I would have that be a Bluebook, but use Test Innovator, for example, to push yourself with harder level questions before you get to test day. So read the question, always go to the passage for English, always utilize techniques in the graphing calculator for maths, write out your working, check your working. The biggest thing to do is to have very, very intense focus on every single second of the question. There is absolutely no room for error. No one else has asked any questions. So, would I do the digital or the physical SAT as I live in England? There is only the digital SAT. You have no choice. You must do the digital SAT on the Bluebook app. So that's a free download from College Board. You will do your practice tests on there, and the same app, or on the same app, you will sit the real test on test day. The only difference will be you take your laptop to a test center and then open Bluebook on your laptop in that test center. My mom is from England. How is it different from SAT to your exams? I don't really understand that question, to be honest. But as I said earlier in the webinar, the English exams are much more about answering in a particular way, and they're much more about depth of content, but the SAT is much more about how you respond under time pressure. And it really is testing, can you think in different ways when the pressure is on? That's what the SAT is testing. So really studying the question patterns is the best thing that you can do for yourself, and pushing yourself with harder level questions. Thank you very much, everyone. It's been wonderful to talk to you tonight. There were definitely, that's been very sad I couldn't get to every single question that I had prepared, but we will be doing more of these, and I'm looking to do one particularly on SAT English, and I'll dive into grammar even more then. So thank you very much. Please use the webinar code, webinar 2510, to get 10% off our e-commerce 5-hour tutoring packages. We'll put that code also in the email when we send out the recording. Hope you found that useful, and I really look forward to having you next time. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.